Many people might think that the journey of a music group to the peak of global popularity runs very smoothly, without any significant obstacles. Behind the glitz of the stage and the cheers of millions of supporters around the world, there is a series of unique guidelines that must be obeyed from the very beginning of the training period. The agency that manages these 7 talented young men, named BTS, had a very different perspective compared to other entertainment companies at that time. These rules were established not only to maintain professionalism, but also to completely shape the character and mental resilience of BTS. Number 7. Displaying an honest image. Have you ever realized that idols on the television screen are often required to always appear cheerful and flawless at all times, as if they have no life problems? This is an unwritten standard that has long been deeply rooted in the South Korean entertainment industry, where agencies usually require their artists to hide all forms of complaints and only show an enjoyable side to the public. However, the management company of BTS took a completely different step by letting the members show their most honest human side to the viewers. Instead of covering up fatigue, mental pressure, or reasonable disagreements that occur within a group, this agency intentionally documented the maturation process of BTS through various documentary series broadcasts, showing sweat, complaints, and even tears. This decision was a very bold move for its time because it carried a huge risk of ruining their reputation if the public was not ready to accept the vulnerable side of a public figure. An interesting fact that we can learn from this phenomenon is that a transparency strategy psychologically can actually build a much stronger emotional bond between performers and the audience, because fundamentally, humans find it easier to feel connected to someone who is brave enough to share their weaknesses, compared to those who always act perfectly. This approach successfully changed many people's views that BTS members are also normal human beings who need time to rest and process their own emotions, not just entertainment products programmed to smile. Number 6. Trainee-period diet rules. Limiting daily food intake to keep the number on the scale stable is one of the most challenging phases that must be passed by almost all aspiring artists in the entertainment industry. In the period before BTS officially made their debut, the agency implemented a very strict weight control system as part of physical preparation so that the members would look ideal in front of the television camera lens. This physical evaluation was carried out regularly, every week, and was often one of the most anxiety-inducing moments for the trainees, considering that the future of their careers was somewhat judged by their discipline in maintaining body shape. However, the most interesting part of this rigid rule is how the guideline was slowly broken by Jin, the oldest member of BTS, who decided to voice his disagreement in a very elegant way, involving a lot of food. Through a live internet broadcast program, he openly consumed extremely large portions of food, ranging from chicken meat, instant noodles, to seafood, in front of hundreds of thousands of viewers who watched him in real time. This action provided a very clear message that enjoying delicious food is a basic human need that should not be extremely restricted just to meet physical appearance demands in a profession. As additional casual information, the standard of food restriction in the entertainment industry at that time was often very irrational, so Jin of BTS's bold step to eat food freely in front of the camera provided a positive impact for viewers to better appreciate the importance of nutritional intake. The management eventually adjusted their policies after realizing that sufficient nutrition was far more crucial to support the physical activities of BTS. Number 5. Strict anti-spoiler rules. In the world of the music industry, the release period of a new work is an important moment where all its preparations are guarded with a level of secrecy resembling the security of classified documents of a secret agency. The company has very strict guidelines that must be obeyed by all staff and BTS members so as not to leak the slightest detail regarding visual concepts, track lists, dance choreography, or melodies that will soon be released to the general public. The main goal of this information gag rule is, of course, to maximize the curiosity of the fans so that when the work is finally officially launched, its impact will immediately attract public attention on a massive scale. However, maintaining complete secrecy turned out to be one of the most difficult operational challenges for this agency, mainly because RM, the leader of BTS, often unconsciously revealed important information while doing live broadcasts or interviews with the media. Due to this unique habit, the company staff always had to be ready behind the scenes to give warning signs or even cut the broadcast every time the artist started talking too in-depth about the secret project currently being worked on. A slightly interesting behavioral analysis note here: information leaks that occur accidentally by the main figure actually often become an indirect promotional strategy that is far more effective than paid advertisements because it can trigger massive organic discussions in various digital community forums. These incidents of secrecy rule violations ultimately became an entertainment of their own for the ARMY fan base, who always analyze every clue from their idol's words, making every release of BTS's work always full of pleasant surprises. Number 4. One shared social media account. In the early 2010s decade, when most music groups in the South Korean entertainment industry began to realize the power of social media as a truly extraordinary promotional tool, almost all companies chose a uniform marketing strategy, which was to create personal accounts for each member or completely hand over social media management to the company's marketing team working behind the scenes. This conventional approach was considered the safest and financially profitable route because it allowed each individual in a group to build their own public image independently, attract solo advertising deals from various famous brands, and form groups of fans who specifically dedicated their support to only their one favorite idol without having to care about the other members. However, the agency managing these 7 young men named BTS actually took a decision that at the time was considered very strange, highly risky, and restricted the artists' freedom of movement, which was requiring all BTS members to only use one social media account collectively without any exceptions allowed by the company's management. This single collective account management rule was strictly enforced for many years, where the 7 BTS members, namely RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook, had to take turns using the same mobile phone or logging into the same Twitter account every time they wanted to communicate with fans, upload photos of daily activities in the practice room, recommend independent songs they were listening to at night, or simply give an update about their health condition after completing a massive concert that drained a lot of sweat and energy. Psychologically and sociologically, this managerial decision was designed with a very fundamental and strategic goal, which was to prevent the emergence of overly striking popularity disparities among the group members during their early career period, when they were in a formative phase and very vulnerable to various ego frictions. In many cases of failure in the pop music entertainment industry, differences in fame levels between individuals in a group often trigger internal jealousy, damage the teamwork harmony that should be solid, and at the worst level, cause contract divisions or group disbandment much earlier than originally planned by the agency. By centralizing all communication interactions into the same digital meeting point, the agency successfully forced the fans to view BTS as a whole, an inseparable organic unit, where, regardless of who their most liked favorite member was, they still had to follow, respect, and pay attention to the other 6 BTS members who routinely appeared on the same timeline every single day, unavoidably. Aside from serving as an internal defense mechanism against ego conflicts, The necessity of sharing one account also naturally trained the BTS members to respect each other's privacy and respect each other's digital space as a large family, because they often read messages written by their teammates directly, gave public replies that provoked laughter, or even playfully uploaded funny photos of their friends fast asleep on their birthdays, which then triggered waves of warm interactions witnessed directly by millions of pairs of eyes across the virtual world. From the perspective of modern information technology science and digital communication strategy, centralizing all search data and interaction traffic at this single point proved to be the most extraordinary genius step in optimizing the social network system algorithms operating at the time. Instead of dividing the power of millions of fans into 7 different accounts and making engagement statistics evenly split so they looked weak in the eyes of computational systems, this single account belonging to BTS received the entire accumulation of likes, new followers, comments, and reposts, which constantly pushed the name BTS to always rank at the top of the list of the most talked about topics at the global level every day, nonstop. This accumulation of data computational power ultimately succeeded in making BTS steal the attention of various prestigious international social media data-driven music awards in the Western music industry, defeating the ranks of giant artists from the American and European continents who already had big names and market dominance long before BTS began to tread their career in the global music industry. This highly rigid collective rule is very important to be understood by anyone because it proves a sociological theory that in the process of building a group or organization in the early stages, the concept of collective synergy, where the entire energy of the members is directed centrally towards the exact same goal, will produce a thrust that is far more massive and lethal compared to letting each individual seek recognition and validation separately. This one-door social media policy provides a valuable lesson for many modern companies that brand identity unity is far more valuable than undirected individual freedom of expression at the crucial stage of building a loyal fan base. This strict rule ultimately only began to be relaxed years later when BTS's position in the global music industry was already very solid and unshakable by anyone, and the bond of brotherhood between BTS members had been tested by time and proven unshakable by pseudo-popularity competition. So they were finally given full freedom to open and manage their own respective personal digital spaces without any more worry from the agency side that it would ruin the core identity and fundamental solidarity of their proud group. Number 3. Artistic freedom and creating their own music. In the midst of a commercial pop music industry ecosystem that often receives sharp criticism because it is considered to only mass-produce idol stars using strictly structured factory methods that kill artists' original creativity, there is a general guideline stipulating that young idols only need to focus on practicing singing techniques and memorizing dance moves perfectly, while all matters of songwriting are completely handed over to a lineup of top-class professional producers expensively hired by the company. Many large entertainment agencies at that time preferred the safe route by buying ready-made songs from famous melody creators abroad or using the services of their own permanent internal composers solely to guarantee that the resulting music would always be in tune with currently popular market trends, very easily accepted by the ears of the wider community in a single listen, and most importantly, have a very minimal risk of commercial rejection from public broadcasting stations. However, the small agency managing BTS, which at that time only operated from a cramped, rented building, actually dared to take an extreme step by mandating a rule that sounded highly risky and very unusual for a group consisting of young boys, which was requiring BTS members to tell their own real-life stories through the lyrics and music melodies that they strictly had to create themselves from beginning to end. The BTS members, especially those who had movement backgrounds in the underground music community and independent street dance art culture, were highly encouraged to actively take major roles in lyric writing, basic melody arrangement, composing, beat making, up to directly supervising the final recording process of all the songs they would later perform with full pride on the performance stage. This golden rule was absolutely not a special privilege given for free by the company, but rather an absolute obligation that highly demanded an extraordinary commitment to hard work, where BTS members had to be willing to spend exhausting, long nights inside a cramped studio room to continuously revise song lyrics that were often outright rejected multiple times by the company's head producer until the writing was deemed to truly have profound philosophical meaning and relevance to the conditions of the era. They were not only allowed, but even highly encouraged to raise social topics that at that time were considered taboo or highly inappropriate to be discussed openly by a pop idol group, such as launching sharp criticisms against the conservative educational system that suppresses students' creativity, voicing the heavy mental burden of the younger generation in finding jobs amidst economic crises, deeply discussing mental health and depression issues, echoing collective anxiety towards an uncertain future, to highlighting various socio-political unrest happening around the society where they grew up and developed. The management's decision to let these young artists write their own works was actually a very deadly business gamble for the survival of the company itself, because if the wider public rejected BTS's song lyrics, which were deemed too heavy to be consumed, or melodies considered less friendly to the ears of casual pop listeners, then that series of failures would immediately have a fatal impact on the bankruptcy of the agency, which at that time truly did not have enough financial reserve capital to fund a failure project a second time. However, history proved that slowly but very surely, the authenticity of the messages and the sincerity of the emotions conveyed by BTS actually became the secret weapon and main key to success that distinguished them from hundreds of other idol groups appearing one after another in that highly ruthless entertainment industry. Music listeners from various age ranges began to deeply realize that the words spoken by BTS in every one of their songs were not just shallow, memorized scripts made by adults solely for the purpose of reaping commercial profits, but the most honest outpouring of the heart from a group of youths who were experiencing the exact same identity confusion, suffering, and hopes as what was being felt by millions of their listeners worldwide. From the perspective of cultural sociology studies and modern consumer psychology, the phenomenon of BTS's popularity explosion teaches us an undeniable fact about how strong the transformative impact of an artwork created with a foundation of high intellectual honesty is. Because basically, humans wherever they are always instinctively seek forms of representation of their own deepest feelings through the entertainment media they consume daily. And listeners' ears turn out to be very smart and capable of clearly distinguishing which artworks are purely produced like factory machines to chase sales figure profits, and which true artworks are born from the human soul's need to express itself freely. As time went by and their musical maturity increased, the obligation to create their own works was slowly no longer only burdened on the BTS members whose main task was rapping, but also began to be enthusiastically adopted by the BTS members who focused on pure vocal techniques, where they gradually began to independently learn to assemble notes, study music production software, and directly contribute their poetic writings into the framework of the group's collective albums, which became increasingly rich in colors and perspectives. This artistic freedom rule, based on productive coercion, has fundamentally completely overhauled the traditional power structure in the working relationship between artists and management in the K-pop industry, while simultaneously proving to the world that giving vast rooms for thought exploration to performers will actually produce an unparalleled level of long-term loyalty from audiences who feel their emotional intelligence is respected addicted because they are constantly presented with messages full of life substance, not just momentary visual entertainment that is temporary, shallow, and will be very easily forgotten as trends change tomorrow. Number 2. Health protocols as top priority. The long history of the entertainment industry, which involves highly intense physical stage activities, often leaves behind many dark and sad stories regarding physical exploitation practices of its workers, solely to maximize overly packed performance schedules and generate the greatest possible financial profit in the shortest possible time frame. There was a dark time in this industry where seeing a young artist forcing themselves to keep performing, singing, and dancing on stage in a very serious bone injury condition, wearing a neck or knee brace, or even passing out in the middle of the show lights due to experiencing chronic fatigue was considered a form of high-level professional dedication that deserved to be praised to the skies by the public and boasted as an achievement by the management. The social norm that silently glorified and normalized this overworking culture to the point of sacrificing lives became a general operational standard that was very difficult to change by anyone, because there was always a strongly embedded psychological fear that rejecting just one job offer would make the artist quickly forgotten by a modern society that has a very short attention span and easily switches to other newcomer idols. Facing this highly destructive and inhumane structural work culture, the agency responsible for BTS's career made a radical decision by deciding to implement high-level medical protection rules, whose system was directly adapted from the physical management of international-level sports athletes, resulting in a strict policy that made maintaining physical health and recovering the mental stability of BTS members the absolute and top priority that could not be contested or canceled by anyone under any circumstances, including by the artists themselves, who might have a strong desire to keep performing. Within the official and binding guidelines drafted by the company's legal team, the agency side had absolute authority and an unconditional veto right to forcibly withdraw BTS members from any form of live television broadcast schedules, album promotional activities on the radio, or even from the stage of a currently festive world tour concert, whenever the professional medical staff in charge assessed that the risk of permanent muscle damage or bone tissue tears was already too high if the physical activity was persistently forced to continue. To support the maximum execution of this protection rule, the company dared to take a financial risk by investing very large amounts to provide all the most comprehensive health recovery facilities, starting from recruiting expensive full-time physical therapist lineups who were obliged to always accompany BTS on every long-distance flight schedule across various continents, preparing sets of specially specified medical massage equipment that were always on standby behind the stage after the show finished, to compiling an annual schedule that specifically ensured there were long holiday rest periods without any cameras at all to restore the body's cell energy after a massive stadium tour series that drained stamina was completely executed. Although this entire protective policy was purely designed with good intentions to protect the future and the most valuable assets of the company, namely the health of BTS itself, its actual implementation on the field often triggered various forms of extremely intense and tear-draining inner conflicts between the medical management side and the BTS members, who had an overly large sense of love and moral responsibility towards millions of their loyal fans who were always waiting out there. There are so many emotional moments, honestly, recorded in the documentary series Diaries of BTS's career journey, where a BTS member sobbed in the dressing room and desperately begged the staff so that he would still be allowed to rejoin the stage and perform completely with his colleagues, because he felt very guilty and indebted to the tens of thousands of people who had been willing to spend a huge amount of money, queue for hours under the scorching sun, and travel across national borders just to be able to see BTS perform live and in their prime right in front of their eyes. It is precisely in these crucial and critical situations, filled with emotional outbursts like this, that the upright rules created by the company functioned perfectly as a rational protective shield, where stage show directors and medical team heads very firmly and uncompromisingly gave instructions prohibiting active movement or requiring the artist to only sit still on a special chair at the corner of the stage for the duration of the performance to prevent fatal muscle tear complications that had a huge potential to end their entire music career permanently and painfully. An objective, in-depth analysis of this comprehensive physical protection management policy ultimately gives all of us a very valuable and enlightening lesson regarding the application of high-level ergonomic principles and the recognition of the maximum limits of a human's body endurance capacity when faced with extremely extreme levels of cardiovascular stress due to the obligation of singing live while performing dozens of continuous oxygen-draining acrobatic dance move sequences for more than 3 hours of performance. This revolutionary human resource management approach in the K-pop industry teaches various corporate institutions a very valuable leadership principle that recklessly sacrificing the physical safety and mental well-being of workers solely to pursue short-term commercial profit targets is a fatal action that ultimately will only disadvantage all parties involved, and that caring for someone's biological condition by applying professional sports science standards is the smartest and best business investment form to ensure maintaining the continuity of the productive age of an extraordinary work group like BTS for a dozen years into the future without experiencing the slightest significant drastic decline in performance capability quality. Number 1. Super strict trainee evaluations. Long before the barrage of flashes from thousands of journalistic camera lights illuminated their bright faces from various directions, and long before massive stadium stages with a capacity of tens of thousands of spectators shouted their names echoing to all corners of the world, the 7 young men who are now known as BTS had to fight tooth and nail and survive going through one of the most physically demanding, mentally torturing, and absolutely unforgiving training systems ever designed and implemented in the entire history of modern pop music industry development. During those early formation days, the agency managing BTS was in a very severely depressed financial crisis condition, almost touching the bankruptcy line, forced to operate painstakingly from inside a damp and often flooded rented basement room, and perfectly aware of the bitter reality that they had absolutely no financial privileges or political connections like those possessed by other giant entertainment companies, which could very easily insert their new artists into various most popular national television programs simply by using the power of business connection lobbying alone. Responding to these very concerning, yet real, logistical and financial resource limitations, the company's management ranks were forced to take the sword path by establishing one absolute and strictly mandatory fundamental rule, which was that there could be absolutely no tolerance room whatsoever for a single pitch or movement mistake when the BTS members later stood on their debut stage, which essentially meant that the skill criteria standard of the trainees had to be continuously forced to be raised multiple times until it ultimately touched a point of technical perfection level that rationally lay beyond the boundaries of normal human physical endurance. This highly cruel survival rule required every young man who was a prospective BTS member to undergo a daily routine that was like military torture and very exhausting, continuously repeating without a break, which included a packed combination of formal school attendance obligations to follow lessons for those who were still teenagers at the time, which was then immediately followed without rest by highly intensive vocal breathing technique lesson sessions, foreign language vocabulary memorization classes, attitude formation and communication ethics when dealing with media journalists, and the daily schedule always ended with the obligation to undergo brutal and non-stop choreography dance synchronization practice sessions, which were often only allowed to finish when the morning sunlight had started to appear shining on the eastern horizon the next day. The evaluation assessment standard to determine the debut eligibility of BTS members at that time was not only shallowly measured from just the basic ability to memorize dance move sequences, but was also microscopically analyzed and very cruelly judged by the degree of precision of every member's arm span angles, which had to look exactly identical and uniform down to the smallest degree of tilt, the ability of the diaphragm muscles in maintaining the stability of vocal pitch frequencies when they were obliged to jump around exerting full power repeatedly, as well as extreme endurance tests of lung breathing capacity, which were routinely tested by the coach by forcing the participants to sprint around an open field for a long time while simultaneously being required to sing fast-tempo song lyrics with a very loud voice and not allowed to be even slightly out of tune. The entire series of sweat-draining physical torture processes and mental pressures heavily burdening the mind had their success measured through the application of a monthly evaluation exam system whose atmosphere was very gripping intense, where prospective BTS members had to line up and stand trembling in front of the ranks of the company's high executives to directly prove the latest skill developments they had learned over the past month, and every participant judged by the judges to have failed to meet the minimum limit of that perfection standard would instantly, at that very second, be sent back to their respective homes and expelled from the training program without the slightest guarantee of compassion or being given a second chance to fix their mistakes. The part of the rule that could be said to be the craziest and most damaging to the psychological condition of this pre-debut training system was the absence of a clear confirmed date on the calendar regarding exactly when their dreams would come true, and they would be officially introduced to the public, where the top management ranks very stubbornly kept refusing multiple times to launch the BTS group into the music industry market until all performance element components within the group were deemed to have truly reached an equilibrium point equal to the technical quality standards usually displayed by senior veteran musicians who already had track records of gigging experience for a dozen years in that harsh entertainment industry. The series of decisions from the director to keep postponing the debut release schedule through multiple season changes created an extraordinarily massive and suffocating pile of psychological stress pressure for the BTS trainees, who every day before going to sleep were always haunted by an extraordinary fear of the possibility of a humiliating failure. But at a contradictory point, at the same time, the harshness of these training conditions without certainty actually ultimately transformed into a perfect combustion chamber that naturally succeeded in uniting the egos of the 7 individuals who initially had different backgrounds into one whole brotherhood group, possessing a very high and unparalleled level of internal cohesion and solidarity, because every day for years, they always shared the exact same cries of suffering and sweat of exhaustion inside that very cramped and poorly ventilated practice studio room. This extreme concept of unforgiving centralized training can be analyzed and very reasonably understood through the lens of physical skill mastery theory, which emphasizes a scientific fact that the formation of truly perfect neural muscle memory can only be achieved through a process of repeating the exact same single activity movement up to thousands of times in a planned and consistent manner, where at its peak, the human autonomic nervous system will ultimately be able to magically respond to various highly complex choreographic and musical note instructions automatically in a fraction of a second, without needing to burden the brain's cognitive mind to think about it consciously anymore. The most valuable lesson that can be learned by everyone from the dark phase, which is the earliest as well as the most decisive part in the history of the rise of the giant group BTS, is a bitter yet inspiring reality that a person's innate natural talent from birth is basically just a lump of raw material that will never be able to produce a great masterpiece of high artistic value if that lump is not sincerely allowed to be forged exhaustively with a very harsh harsh level of life discipline, the total sacrifice of youth and rest time without hesitation, and the forced application of a personal self-evaluation standard set far higher, piercing the clouds, compared to all forms of average demands or expectations given by the ordinary society environment around them.